Hi everyone, it's Lindsay and I'm here today with a little bit of a longer video, but I wanted to take you through the whole process of masking off this scene. So I am starting off with the brand new Happy Camper stamp set from Joy Claire Stamps. I will also be using my Misty for all my stamping today. Any stamp positioner will do, or an acrylic black will work just fine as well. I also have a piece of white cardstock already loaded in here, and it measures 4 inches by 5¼ inches. So I'm starting off with what's going to be in front of my scene the most. So that's going to be my fire. I'm going to go ahead and put that on the left hand side of my panel, and then I'll go ahead and stamp it down. I'm using Memento ink, but you need to use whatever black ink corresponds with your coloring medium. So once I had that stamped down, and I am doing double stamping on all of these just because Memento ink isn't the darkest black there is, but it's what I need for my coloring medium. So I just remedy that by double stamping. So I went ahead and masked off my fire, and I'm using Ink-a-Dink-a-Doo masking paper. You can use Post-it notes, you can use masking tape, Post-it tape, whatever you may have on hand that you can get a mask down. Now I'm going to go ahead and place the camper stamp on the right hand side of the panel. Now I just closed my lid to pick that up, and I do not want my paper to move, and sometimes my magnets aren't quite strong enough to hold my paper in place with my sticky acrylic stamps. So I like to stick my bone folder in there, hold it right in place as I lift up that panel or that stamp away from my panel. Then I can go ahead and ink up this camper stamp, and I will stamp it down. Now you can see at this point it doesn't look like I needed to mask off that fire because they're not overlapping at all. But once I get going, you'll see why I'm just placing my mask down as I go. So I also have a camper mask that I made. Again, I'm using the same masking paper here. I just peel off that blue backing paper and I put that right down over my stamped image. Now I know this looks like a lot of work for one card. However, remember you can always reuse those masks. They do stay sticky for quite a long time, and if they ever get a little unsticky, you can always do a little tack it over and over, just a little dot on the back so it will stay in place. Now I'm going to go ahead and pick up my little tree stamp. I have placed it on the very far left hand side of the panel, and it's going to be hanging off the edge. Now I like to always do a few images that are hanging off the left side and the right side just to make it look like a true picture. So I went ahead and I stamped that tree down. Now before I mask it off, I'm going to stamp a tree right on the left hand side of the camper. The camper is going to cut off a little bit of that tree. Now this tree has a little grounding effect on the very bottom of it, so I want to line that up with the tree I've already stamped. Now this is where my Misty comes in really helpful. I can see where that grounding effect is with my grid, and then I can just line that up as well with my stamp that I'm placing down. Again, I'll just ink this up and stamp that right down. I'm doing double stamping on all of these. I'm just kind of cutting it out of the video because it gets a little tedious and repetitive. But here you can see I do double stamp that tree as well. And then I'm placing 2 masks down. Now I cut my mask beforehand on my video because it does take a little bit of time. So I've already cut these 2 masks, and that's all I'm going to cut for my trees. I will stamp more than 2 trees, however, I can move these masks around as I need them. I don't need more than 2 in this particular scene. So right in the middle of both trees, I'm going to go ahead and stamp a 3rd tree, and I'm lining up that grounding effect on the bottom of the trees with the 2 I've already stamped. These are clear stamps, so I can see right through it, very easy to line up, and I can always look through the grid of my Misty. So I'll ink this stamp up again and stamp it right down, and because I have both of those trees masked, I already have my camper masked, and I already have my fire masked, everything's going to come out nice and clean. So I'll go ahead and give this a nice firm press, and then I'm moving that tree on the right hand side. Now this is going to cut off just a little bit of that left hand side, and because I don't have anything that needed masked on this side, I went ahead and left my tree masks just in place on those 2 trees. But you'll see a little bit later how I can move those around as I need them. So I'll go ahead and ink that stamp up and press it down. And then my last little tree is going to look like I really probably shouldn't even have stamped it, but just these little bits and pieces here and there really give a nice effect to your overall scene. So while I'm just having the very top of that tree poke behind the camper, it gives a more realistic look. Not necessarily realistic, but it looks more complete. So here you can see I picked up that second mask that I had on the right hand tree there, and I moved it over to my center tree. Now I am using these mountain stamps. It's actually one stamp, but it's a range of mountains. This is from the Wild and Free stamp set, and I love doing this. I love combining stamp sets and just making a whole scene with 2 or 3 stamp sets. It's a lot of fun for me. So I went ahead and I chose this mountain range from that stamp set, and I am going to put this behind all of my trees. So here you can see I'm lining it up, and it's got a cutoff point on the right hand side. So I am lining it up with the tree lines on the right hand side, and you'll see what I mean once I stamp it down. But I'm looking straight through that stamp, lining it up so it doesn't get in that tree at all. And then I've also moved my paper back over on the right hand side of my MISTI. Now if need be, if you have a larger stamp, you can always turn it and work with it horizontally as well. It doesn't have to be used in the vertical position. So I went ahead and stamped that mountain stamp down. I'll give it another quick little stamp here just to darken up that black color. And then I've moved my tree mask to the tree that is behind the camper and also the one on the left hand side of the camper. Now I've went ahead and placed my little mountain range here, and I'm just lining it up so it's a little bit lower than the one I previously stamped, so it doesn't look like exactly the same stamp. Whenever you're using the same stamp over and over in a scene, you want to make sure you're changing either the height of it or the perception, something. You need to change it so it doesn't look so repetitive. Now I went ahead and moved that one mask to the right hand side tree. I've also scooched my paper over, and I've placed that mountain range down so it lines up with the one I previously stamped, and I can go ahead and stamp it down, and it is going to hang off the right hand side, and I also have the mountain range hanging off the left hand side of the paper. Now this is my favorite part of making scenes. I love taking the masks off. So I'm going to remove these masks, stick the masks on the back side of the stamp set so I can reuse them in the future. And as I remove these masks, you'll see how well these hide the stamps behind them, and as you remove them, you can kind of see the scene coming together. But I removed that camper mask, and then finally I'll remove my little fire here, and there I've got a complete scene ready to be colored up. There's a close-up view of that scene, and you can see everything is perfectly masked off. Now I chose to use my colored pencils, and I'm going to be using some Gam Salt and my blending stumps to blend out these colors. You can use whatever coloring medium you feel most comfortable with. You can use watercolor, your alcohol markers, whatever it is you feel like using. It works with your scenes. So here I am, and I am just using about 3 colors on my trees. I'm using a couple colors on my little tree bases and about 3 colors for my mountains. Now on my mountains I'm using gray colors, and you can see I am bringing that gray all the way down to the ground that I made with those tree lines. And that is because if you were to look through the bottoms of the trees, you wouldn't see any blue sky or anything like that because the mountains are going to be in the way. So while you're coloring, be thinking about what you would actually be seeing if this was a true scene or a true picture. So I went ahead and colored in all those mountains gray. I also used very light gray for the snow tops on top of the mountains, used some green for the grass. I colored in my camper very bright so it stood out, and then I'm just using some blues to go in and color in that sky, and I'm really deepening up the mountains where they come to a point in between the two just for added depth. Now I am using the Wander with Purpose stamp from the stamp set as my sentiment, and I just used the backing paper on that stamp to kind of position the sentiment where I wanted it. I'll ink this up with VersaFine Onyx Black ink and stamp it down a couple times right onto the scene that I've created. Now I'm using my stamp positioner here. I put so much work into the masking and the coloring, I wasn't about to completely ruin the whole scene with my sentiment stamp. So I stamped that down a few times, and I will cover that with my clear embossing powder just to help it stand out a little bit from all that coloring and all that's going on in that background. If you decide to do this, just make sure whatever coloring medium you use to color in your scene is dry before you attempt to do any embossing. So the only thing I'm going to do to this card is pop this panel up onto an A2 side folding card base with some fun foam and double-sided adhesive. When I've put this much time and effort into the masking and the coloring, I don't like to add any extra embellishments if I can help it. I like to keep my focus on that picture that I made. But that will finish off the card for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope I gave you some tips and tricks on masking out these complex scenes. As always, I will leave you guys with just a few finished pictures. For more information and the supply list, you can head to my blog as well as the Joy Claire Stamps blog. I will leave both links in the description box below. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and happy crafting!